Hello everybody, this is Max, and welcome to Terraria, but I am playing as the character Zuko from the TV show Avatar the Last Airbender. In addition, as in my previous video where I beat Terraria without using storage chests and only using items that fit in my inventory, which you can check out in the description, all of the music that you hear in this video is my own original music created by me. This time, I will be displaying little titles on screen whenever the music changes, so you can let me know in the comments what your favorite track was. Okay, so before I say anything more about the challenge, here's a huge spoiler alert for the show. Turn back now if you haven't watched Avatar yet. Okay, so Zuko is famous for using fire and for befriending dragons, so we are allowed to use fire-themed stuff, including anything found in Hell, as well as dragon-themed stuff. Originally, I was going to use just fire, but I realized that there weren't any fire-themed items at the end of the game that would be powerful enough for an amateur like myself to take down the final boss. So I opted to include dragon-themed stuff, giving me many late-game options, as you will see when we get there. Okay, another thing to point out is that I'll be playing on Journey mode for this playthrough, with the difficulty slider set to Expert the whole time. This is my preferred way of playing because I get the added difficulty and fun items of Expert mode, but I can avoid too much grinding using the duplication features of Journey mode. I won't be using the invincibility thing or anything like that, but I will be occasionally using the spawn rate slider, weather changers, and time changers just to speed things up and allow me to get certain items more easily. Before I even started the game, I had done some research about what fire-themed weapons were available, so I had a well-defined plan for basically the whole game. For the pre-hard mode stage, I was going to use fire arrows first as an easy-to-acquire beginning option. Then, I was going to craft Molotov cocktails, which I've never used before, but always sounded super fun, so I was really excited to get to that point eventually. And then I was going to use Molotov cocktails to defeat the Eater of Worlds and go straight to Hell to get Hell stuff, which would allow me to sprint through the rest of pre-hard mode with ease. Okay, time for some gameplay. The very first thing I did upon loading into the world is throw most of the Journey mode starting items into the trash. I like using Journey mode to avoid grinding and assist with getting rare items, but I do not want to use the other features like starting with bonus items, invincibility, or extended block placement range, to name a few. Anyway, the typical thing to do at the start of a playthrough is wander around the surface, so I headed left and along the way collected things like dayblooms and mushrooms, and crafted and researched common materials and crafted goods like wood platforms. If you don't know this already, research is Journey mode's duplication feature. Basically, you have to get a sufficient quantity of each item to research it, and once it is researched, you can duplicate it infinitely. I came across some pots over there and got two intriguing items, bombs and torches. And now here's the first instance of what I will call the Journey mode dilemma. Should I use these items, or should I research them to be able to duplicate infinite quantities later? For both of these, my choice for now was to keep them unresearched. Bombs would allow the demolitionist to move in, and at that point I could use my infinitely duplicated money to buy enough bombs to research at that time. Torches are important to give light in caves, but also to craft my first usable fire-themed weapon, which is fire arrows. I kept these torches as well to simply hold them for light, and perhaps make my first fire arrows if needed. I wanted to explain this early instance of the Journey mode dilemma so that you have an idea of what was going through my mind in these early stages. As you can see, I started exploring this early cave and I stumbled upon a large deposit of topaz, giving me the potential for my first grappling hook. Then I found a minecart track, which is always fun, which brought me to this defenseless position in the underground ice biome. I got a life crystal, which I decided not to use, instead waiting for the full amount to research first. I looted a chest for the helpful ice mirror and less helpful ice skates before getting slaughtered by these ice bats. Respawning in, I headed off to the right, finding absolutely nothing, and then realized I would not be able to survive exploring at night anyway, so I returned to spawn to construct some houses. Last playthrough I made my houses underground in order to keep the above ground area perfectly flat for fighting battles later on, and I did the same thing here. I tried getting out to explore more and was instantly killed by the enemies, so I just stood there in my houses waiting for daytime. When daytime did come, I went exploring again, and mined out the surface deposit of lead ore. Next, I had learned the location of the snow biome due to my recent misadventure on the minecart, so I headed straight there to see if there was any tasty loot, and sure enough, I found a chest with the unusable snowball cannon, but more importantly, some lead bars. After that, I was immediately killed by a poisoned dart trap. Back at home, I made this little chest area to temporarily store things that I didn't have enough of to research yet, and then I spent some of my lead bars on an anvil and crafted that topaz grappling hook. Now, at some point in one of the chests I looted, I had collected 35 fire arrows, so I crafted a wood bow and enough additional fire arrows to fulfill their research requirement, allowing me to research them and duplicate infinite fire arrows, granting me my first potent fire weapon of the game. A nearby green slime was my first victim. Next, I set out back to the left and had fun slaying monsters along the way. I took the opportunity to research money, allowing me to buy anything from the shop from now on. Speaking of which, my full coin purse attracted the merchant, giving me one of my favorite items, the mining helmet, as well as the first pylon. Then I once again headed left, and despite night falling, I was able to survive thanks to my fire arrows both illuminating and dispatching any threats. I explored this random cave and then finally made it to my destination, the snow biome, where I died. Okay, well then a traveling merchant spawned, so I purchased some stuff, nothing too revolutionary, and then returning once again to the snow biome, I finally got around to what I actually wanted to do, which was make some more houses. Next, I continued some early game mining, locating down in the icy caverns some flurry boots, some gold ore, and this minecart track. I narrowly escaped death in this spider cave, barely managing to get over to the chest for a web slinger. I haven't really used this grappling hook before, so I thought, why not try it out? My mining came to an end when I was buried alive under some slush blocks. Now it was time to explore the other direction, so I headed off to the right. I soon found myself in the jungle and decided it was the perfect opportunity to head in there and construct another set of houses. The only problem was the jungle is quite dangerous, and so you are about to see a very lengthy saga of me repeatedly dying while trying again and again to get in there and construct houses. Before we get to that though, I should mention that at this point, I remembered to use the lead that I had collected, so I researched lead bars and crafted a whole bunch of stuff, including a bucket, a cooking pot, the upgraded minecart, enough chains to research them, a lead bow to hopefully survive better in the jungle, a sawmill for more crafting later, and enough minecart tracks to research them. Then I waited until morning and set off for the jungle again. I want to take a moment to comment on how cool my jungle was in this world. It wasn't just a boring flat area with a couple ponds. I mean, we have this initial jagged area, this part with a cool surface tunnel, this big cliff right here, and then this absolutely crazy section with like jagged cliffs, floating jungle island things, a underground cabin right at the surface. Side note, it was really fun using the web slinger in this area. So anyway, yeah, super fun and interesting jungle generation in this world. I love when the game gives us these interesting landscapes. It makes me want to get like a crazy world generation mod or maybe a very unique custom world and do a playthrough on there. Alright, so given the rugged terrain, I decided to make a nice horizontal platform above the ground here in the jungle and build my houses off of that. So I harvested some rich mahogany and started building while also fending off huge waves of jungle slimes. All the gel they gave me put me in range of duplicating torches, so I did that, and by doing so, unlocked the next fire weapon for my early game arsenal, the flaming mace. I tried out my new weapon against the latest slimes, and died. Alright, well maybe the flaming mace isn't good enough for multiple jungle slimes, and I should stick with the long range arrows. I've been rambling about the jungle for a while now, so anyway, I returned to the jungle, died, started working on a platform to stay a bit safer, died, illuminated my platform, and finally made it over to where my houses were going to be, died, slept until morning and made the outer frame of my houses, died, bought a DPS meter and stopwatch from this traveling merchant, and finally finished my jungle houses. So that's the jungle houses saga, hope you enjoyed it. I then explored more to the right just to get some more vision of the world. If there was anything I wanted to find, it would be either herb bags or worm bins from surface chests. These are among the goodie bag category of items in Terraria that contain an assortment of random drops in each one, and all the goodie bag type items are extremely powerful on journey mode because you can research them, and then by extension, you have unlocked infinite quantities of their entire loot table. Anyway, one of the most fun things that happened on this mini journey to the right-hand side was I was trying to get a high angle with my bow to snipe this antlion in the desert. I mean, I missed like 100 shots before eventually hitting it, so maybe just snipe isn't the right word, but it was certainly really fun to do. Ultimately, I did find something important, the corruption biome. I died before getting down in there, but I definitely set my sights on this area because, as I explained in the intro to this video, as soon as I defeat the Eater of Worlds, I can immediately unlock Hell Gear and pretty much just breeze through the rest of pre-hard mode with ease. However, seeing as I could barely get through the jungle and then died instantly to corruption monsters upon arrival in their biome, I needed some serious power-ups if I was going to stand a chance against the Eater of Worlds. I started with some crafting, including a keg, glass, bottles, mugs, ale, and with all of that plus some silk that I had already made previously, I was able to finally unlock what I had been looking forward to all this time, the Molotov cocktail. I immediately tested it out and they look so cool. So these lingering sparks that the cocktails spew out everywhere continue to damage enemies that walk through them. My thought process was that the initial explosion of the cocktails, plus the lingering sparks, plus the burning damage over time effect, would all be ideal attributes for a weapon that can cut down the Eater of Worlds. Here are some tests of the cocktails against a couple of demon eyes. And then at the right edge of the screen, you can see a zombie get heavily damaged just from walking into one of the lingering sparks. I was super happy at this time to recognize that my high hopes and expectations for these Molotovs were completely met and exceeded. Also, the visuals are epic too. Just look at this inferno I create during every fight. Next on the to-do list is definitely some mining. I dove into the icy caverns and found a life crystal, silver ore, a helpful fairy that took me to a life crystal, gold ore, this cool area with thin ice, which I was able to navigate very easily thanks to my earlier ice skate pickup, my old friend this minecart track that took me to a chest, another chest, silver ore, and eventually out of the ice part where I found a life crystal. And this glowing mushroom biome. These mushroom biomes are always a great way to find loot. According to the wiki, they don't actually generate extra loot directly, but because they are big open areas with flat ground and built-in illumination, they are conducive to spawning things like chests and life crystals, and it makes it easy to spot them. So yeah, I got some life crystals there as well as gold ore. And then here's something interesting. So I was throwing around some Molotovs and the visual sparks went into the floor and illuminated some more gold ore buried in the mud. So I was able to get even more gold just because of that illumination. Pretty cool. I ended up in this cabin to the left, giving me a nice band of regeneration. Then I got more gold, a life crystal, an extractinator from this mushroom cabin, another gold chest over here with shoe spikes, and here's a big one, another life crystal giving me a total of 10. That's how many you need in order to research life crystals, so I instantly chomped them down and rocketed to 400 max HP. Now, was I done in the mines? My main goal was the HP, but then I was also pretty close to 100 gold ore, which is how much you need to research it. So I decided to stay and look for more gold. After searching for a while and exploring another cabin, a marble biome, and another cabin, I came across more gold, which left me just 2 gold ores away. So I continued exploring, coming across this cool granite cave that looks pretty awesome when lit up by my Molotov Inferno. And then, in a fitting end to my mining expedition, I found myself back in the icy caverns, where I got my last 2 gold ores. Quick side note, I actually had a couple of gold ores in one of my chests that I completely forgot about, so the whole search for the last 2 ores thing was actually unnecessary. It made me think that perhaps I should just partially research stuff rather than saving it in a chest, because I am way too forgetful to properly use my chest system. Using my infinite gold, I crafted a complete gold armor set, a gold bow to improve my fire arrow damage, a gold axe, because why not, and a gold pickaxe to make mining much faster. Next, I wanted to make some progress on potions, since that's one area I hadn't really worked on yet. While I didn't have infinite herb bags yet, I did have infinite daybloom seeds, so I planted a whole ton of those, since I could use them to make both iron skin and regeneration potions. Next, I made a gold watch, always a very useful item, before sprinting off to the right to get back to the corruption, stopping only to research gel along the way. I continued running to the left. This whole segment of me just running is reminding me of the Shrek 2 line, he braved blistering winds and scorching deserts, you know, that one. Anyway, I eventually got back to the corruption and reached the main tunnel thing. And here comes a building montage of my arena preparations. First, torches went everywhere to illuminate the area. Then I made a level horizontal platform, fighting off rogue eater spawns at the same time. The gold bow made short work of them at range, and the Molotovs helped at closer quarters. Eventually, I did complete my platform all the way across. Next, I, blew up some of my arena while trying to get the shadow orbs. A classic corruption moment for me. Next up is the usual duo of campfires and heart lanterns for some HP regeneration, and I filled up the whole place with those two things. Next, something unexpected happened. I got the message that goblins were approaching from the east. Now, I was going to just completely ignore them and deal with that when I got back to spawn, after taking down the Eater of Worlds. But a couple of goblins actually showed up down here. I was surprised to see them because I was under the impression that they only appeared near spawn, but I think because I was on the east side of the world, I guess some of the initial goblins came down here. They stopped spawning after the first few, so I just continued setting up my arena. I set up ropes into this little chasm here, and then remotely destroyed the last shadow orb with dynamite, and the fight was on with the Eater of Worlds. Alright, and the Eater of Worlds went down. Finally, the first boss of the challenge defeated. Turns out the Molotovs did in fact work very well against the Eater of Worlds. Now, for bosses on Journey Mode, we have another dilemma. Should I open the treasure bag now and get some quick loot? Or should I defeat the boss 2 more times to amass a total of 3 bags, allowing me to research and duplicate them? In most cases, the answer is actually pretty easy and depends on the specific boss. For the Eater of Worlds, the only things we get from the treasure bags are the Worm Scarf, which, due to its 100% drop rate, does not matter for this decision, and then 2 resources, Shadow Scales and Demonite. In both cases, I thought that I was close enough to the research quotas that I could get there with just 1 bag. So I opened the treasure bag, and sure enough, I instantly unlocked full duplication of both Demonite and Shadow Scales. I researched both things and I was excited to start crafting, so I placed on a furnace and an anvil. But then I witnessed something hilarious, so check this out. On the right side of the screen, there's nothing there, right? Then I go a bit to the left to fight eaters, and then when I get back, an unconscious man has appeared! So yeah, I rescued him and bought some stuff. Then, all of a sudden, a ton more goblins arrived. Honestly, I was so confused by this. I thought it was caused by having an NPC around, maybe? So I spent some time killing those goblins. Then finally, I had a chance for some Demonite crafting. Since I had infinite quantities of materials, I went all out with a breaker, a nightmare pickaxe, a full set of shadow armor, a demon bow to further upgrade my fire arrow capabilities, and a fisher of souls, because yes, I will be doing some fishing in this video in order to get all the best potions, which, for someone with my skill set or lack thereof, is necessary on the expert mode difficulty setting. Returning to spawn, it was time to defeat the remaining goblins. The Molotov cocktails were quite effective during this event, igniting anything that got too close with those lingering sparks. The problem, as usual, was the goblin archers. Despite them, I was able to clear the event with ease. I noticed that it had just become night as the last goblin fell, so I quickly constructed an elevated wood platform with the intention of fighting the Eye of Cthulhu. I summoned the boss and the fight was on. And the Eye of Cthulhu goes down. Wasn't that freeze frame epic though? It really looked like the boss was about to just devour me, but my arrow dealt the final blow just in time. Yes, the demon bow with flaming arrows was more than enough to take down this boss. Now, in the aftermath of the goblin fight, I had noted that many of my day blooms had blossomed. I now had enough to duplicate. I also ended up with enough fallen stars to get full mana. I headed over to some water to get bottled water, and then used that with my day blooms to get full research on iron skin potions and regeneration potions. Now that I have the Nightmare Pickaxe, we can officially move on to the final phase of my pre-Hardmode game plan, Hellstone. I got some of my infinite dynamite and started blasting my elevator down. But it's also still fun to explore the mines, so I hopped on this minecart track and died immediately after stepping on an explosive trap. So I returned to the underground, continuing to get sidetracked a little bit with like this cabin and also this water chest. Then I got back on task with the elevator before immediately getting sidetracked again with another minecart. You know, one of the reasons I am starting to make YouTube videos is simply because I love playing Terraria, and so sometimes you just gotta run around in the mines and see what happens. Especially now that they added these cool areas with, like, glowing moss. It's really cool when it shows up on screen. This ended up being a pretty long minecart, so I looked at my map to see just how far I'd gone. Now, I paused my excavation here because I had a sizable pool of water collecting at the bottom of the shaft, so I thought it was a good opportunity to quickly fish up 3 armored cave fishes. I need 3 of any given fish to research them on journey mode, and the armored cave fishes are very important to craft the endurance potion. I didn't have much bait, so I ran around catching worms for a while to prepare, and then I duplicated an infinite quantity and caught my 3 fishies. I resumed blasting dynamite, thinking that the fishing operation would be my final detour before hell, until I came across none other than the Goblin Tinkerer himself, and immediately bought his valuable items, the rocket boots and the Tinkerer's Workshop. I continued blasting again, and then had another detour, this time diverting a large pool of water into a large pool of lava to get all the obsidian I need to complete research on that. Then I finally reached Hell, where I promptly set to work die instantly. So anyway, I returned to Hell, where this time I promptly began dying instantly again. I crafted Spectre Boots, which would hopefully help compensate for my major skill issue, and this time I died to fall damage on this random platform. Alright, 4th time is the charm as I dove into my elevator once again and died to fall damage on the same platform. Alright, 5th time is the charm as I removed the offending platform, watched some Molotovs falling with me, which was a pretty cool sight, and established a clean foothold in Hell with a nice wood platform. I still needed a couple more things before mining Hellstone itself, such as this Hellforge. I was really struggling to take down these swarms of Hell enemies with just a demon bow and fire arrows, and my life flashed before my eyes in this house with a couple lava slimes and a mere flaming mace, a pre-boss weapon, as my only close quarters option. I did survive that, but was promptly obliterated by a demon thereafter. Okay, long story short, I returned to Hell to gather fire blossoms, and fought an entire goblin army that randomly spawned, and then finally made the last piece of the Hell puzzle, Obsidian Skin Potions. Now, with Obsidian Skin Potions, mining Hellstone was a simple task, so easy that even an amateur like myself... I dove into the lava and mined enough Hellstone to reach the research quota, and just like that, Hellstone bars were mine. This was a huge development because, until now, the Zuko challenge has been making the game much harder by severely limiting my offensive options. But now, Hellstone is pretty much among the best stuff you can get in pre-hard mode, so the rest of this stage of the game will be much easier to handle. In total, I crafted a full set of molten armor, an imp staff, a molten hamax, a molten pickaxe, a volcano, and a molten fury. All in all, an immense upgrade to our armor, offense, and tools. Now, what to do to try out a bunch of new gear? Why, one of my favorite Terraria events, of course, the Old Ones Army. So I flattened out a big arena, and then started the event right away. Unfortunately, I was a bit overconfident with my new gear. The first wave, things were looking good, and my imp actually pretty much cleared the whole thing on its own, with some volcano action later on. But around wave 3, I started getting worried. My Molten Fury was pretty good, but without any piercing qualities, it wasn't really the right choice for this situation. And my volcano was too slow and required me to get too close, causing me to waste time traveling back and forth across the screen. I tried spawn killing stuff at the left side to get a head start on wave 4, which helped me clear that wave, but wave 5 ended up killing my crystal and me. But there was hope! as I was about to die, I tried testing out the old reliable Molotovs against the remaining enemies, to see if that might be a better choice. And sure enough, the ability of those lingering sparks to ignite every enemy and deal damage to every single one as they walk by seemed like it might end up being better than my Hellstone gear. I also decided to use the Flame Burst Sentry. I was very lucky in this challenge as one of the only 4 sentry options for the Old One's army, the Flame Burst Sentry, still fits the Zuko challenge, being a fire-based weapon. I started the event again, and this time emerged victorious. Alright, and Old One's army level 1 is complete. I did the event a couple more times to stock up on more defender medals. I didn't get all the way to the research quota, I just wanted a bit more help to afford sentry upgrades later. Then I purchased the jungle pylon and continued to the right to discover a surface chest with 2 herb bags inside. This gave me infinite quantities of every single potion herb, opening up my potion possibilities greatly. I explored the fun living trees a bit, then found myself at the ocean where I constructed ocean houses. Returning home, I used my herbs to craft infinite quantities of the Shine, Night Owl, Builder, Mana Regeneration, Magic Power, Spelunker, and Danger Sense potions, massively improving my quality of life and abilities. I also made Hellfire arrows for better damage compared to the basic fire arrows. Then it was time for some desert houses for the eventual desert pylon, and then, since it was nighttime, I also got to work on a quick wood platform and then started a successful fight against Skeletron. Yes, my Molten Fury with Hellfire arrows was more than good enough to demolish Skeletron. After my victory, I made a little corrupted fishing spot to get Eboncoy for another combat potion later on. Next, I wanted to locate the Shimmer, and unfortunately I spent literally so long looking for it. Like, actually an hour of footage across 3 separate recording sessions before realizing that I was on the wrong side of the world. So yeah, so much digging, all for nothing because of my certified electron brain moment. When I finally realized my mistake and confirmed it on the wiki, I used the opportunity to make a long minecart track since it's a speedy way to get around the world and is quite effective against a couple of hard mode bosses. Anyway, I finally dug my way into the Shimmer, where I made a little tunnel under it in case I fell in, made a couple houses nearby in order to get a pylon eventually, and set up a little area where I could drop stuff in. Next, it was time for a dungeon raid, where I had an easy time surviving with my Hellstone gear. I was able to find the mechanic, an alchemy table, although that is not as useful in journey mode, a shadow key, important since all Shadow Chest items being located in Hell were approved for my Zuko challenge. Bones, which would be needed for the Skeletron Prime crafting summon in Hardmode, and the handgun, which is not usable by Zuko as is, but can be upgraded with Hellstone to make the Phoenix Blaster, our ranged weapon of choice for the rest of pre-Hardmode. I mined this random meteorite just in case I ever needed it, and then went to visit my friends in the Shimmer Cave to get the pylon up and reforge my gear with the Goblin Tinkerer. I then went on a spree of unlocking various upgrades. I took a quick stop in the desert for some mandibles, and used those to craft and research mining potions. Then I took a quick stop into the underground jungle, where I was lucky enough to grab the Feral Claws on my first chest. Next, I went around Hell a bit and looted many shadow chests, unlocking my last few Zuko-themed weapons of pre-Hardmode. This expedition had the side benefit of giving me a chance to make a long platform to use when I fight the Wall of Flesh. Quick side note, I found this very cool area of the underground jungle right at the border with Hell. I actually just really like these big wide open caverns that often generate around here. I think it's really fun to jump around with our late pre-Hardmode mobility and blast hornets. For yet another upgrade, I dunked some herb bags in the Shimmer to get a researchable quantity of worm bins, and then spammed them until I had collected a researchable quantity of golden worms, allowing me to pretty much cheese my way into infinite quantities of the best food in the game, Golden Delight. While down here, I also reforged all my accessories to warding because, let's be honest, since when have I had a clean no-hits fight? Next on the upgrade list was some Sky Islands. What I actually wanted from here was definitely the balloon, which is one of the few accessories that synergizes with wings, and is therefore quite useful in Hardmode. With all of these preparations out of the way, I was finally able to face my greatest challenge yet, the mighty Wall of Flesh, where my over-preparation and massive quantities of fire-themed gear allowed me to... Well, anyway, back home I did a bit of extractinatoring to get a ruby for a gold crown, crafted a slime crown in the corruption, and then easily defeated King Slime 3 times. The reason for this was to get the slime mount, which I like to have on hand in general since it increases your falling speed by a lot, helping with quick dodges during combat. Then I returned to Hell for an enemy grind to get some more equips, my primary interest being the Magma Stone for the ability to inflict a fire debuff using any melee weapon. To do this, I pulled out a classic journey mode technique, increasing enemy spawn rate to shorten the real-life time it takes to grind enough enemies for the drop. Of course, this brings some extra danger, and I did almost die. Now, looking back at this footage, I never actually got the Magma Stone, so I'm not really sure why that is, but anyway, next I challenged the Wall of Flesh for a rematch, and ended up winning the fight this time. Immediately after beating the wall, we found ourselves in Hardmode, and in another classic Terraria scenario, I noticed that I was actually directly under the freshly generated Hallow, so I did a quick Soul of Light grind down here, getting enough to research after a short time. Also, it looks like now I do have the Magma Stone, so I guess I found one at some point, but I couldn't pinpoint the location in my footage, so sorry. Now it's time for a classic early Hardmode upgrade bonanza. Some of the upgrades I wanted were generic and always useful, such as these endurance potions that I finally remembered to actually make after getting the fish a really long time ago. The more interesting set of upgrades, though, is going to be finding fire-themed gear for our continued Zuko challenge. The build I wanted to go for was inflicting some powerful fire debuffs on all enemies, as it is both possible and seemingly super-duper fun to get them all. Wearing frost armor inflicts frostburn, equipping the Magma Stone inflicts hellfire, using a Shadow Flame weapon acquired from goblins inflicts Shadow Flame, and finally, using a flask of Cursed Flames inflicts Cursed Inferno. Unfortunately, I learned this after already completing the whole playthrough, but apparently these debuffs do not stack with each other. And although enemies will have the different colored particle effects corresponding to each debuff, only the highest damage one actually does anything. So, I did spend a lot of time getting a bunch of stuff allowing me to inflict all these debuffs at once, but it actually doesn't work. Oh well, I still had fun doing it, and beat the game easily, so no worries. Next, I fought the Wall of Flesh again, thinking maybe I would duplicate those bags at some point. Then I headed out into the world to seek the Hardmode Corruption biome, while also testing my survivability with pre-Hardmode gear in the new Hardmode world. Luckily, I found that the Dark Lance was quite effective at holding off these melee opponents, and the Phoenix Blaster was accurate and powerful enough to dispatch foes at range, even if it took a while. Over to the left side of the world, I came across the new corruption, which unfortunately had gobbled up my desert, so these desert houses would not be viable for much longer. Oh well. I dug down and met my demise against a corrupt mimic, which I was not prepared to defeat at this time. Returning to the location of my icy grave, I tunneled to the left in search of an open cavern where I could farm cursed flames and souls of night. I found one clinger over here in the spider cave, which I defeated with my Dark Lance. I'm starting to really like this thing as an alternative to the Knight's Edge for this stage of the game. Then, just outside the spider cave, I found a great spot for farming. I could stand back here in this spot, sort of in a secluded area, relatively safe from attacks, while blasting away at the enemies spawning in the cavern to the lower right. The battle paused for a second when I found a friendly skeleton merchant, from whom I purchased yo-yo gear on the off chance I switched to the hard mode hell yo-yo, which I never actually did. Then the icy battle continued until I found another friend, the bound wizard, over here. Eventually, I returned to the surface after researching both the souls and flames. Since I had a couple new NPCs, and knowing that more were still coming, I quickly constructed a bunch of new homes for all the incoming friends. I did this over in the jungle area because I thought the pylon would be pretty safe from corruption or hallow spread, and I didn't want the houses near my spawn since I used that area as an arena. Since I was in the area, I spent some time exploring the hard mode jungle, where I located the jungle temple before blowing up this trap. I tunneled down for quick access in the future, dying multiple times. Along the way, I found a beehive and took down Queen Bee. The Witch Doctor arrived soon after, which was the whole reason to fight the Queen Bee in the first place for this playthrough, and I was able to purchase the imbuing station and get my flasks of cursed flames. I wanted shark fins, so I spent some time in the ocean with 10 times spawn rates active, but sharks were still pretty rare and I ended up drowning. I fought the Wall of Flesh again and lost this time. Next, I needed to kill a few ice golems in order to get frost armor. One great thing about Journey Mode is that I don't have to wait for randomly occurring weather or things like that to be in my favor. I used my Journey Mode powers to set a permanent blizzard, and now I could take my time farming ice golems. Now, these things are pretty tough, so I died very quickly in my first encounter. But you can use terrain to cheese them, so basically, I started setting up some flat areas and tunnels to use my terraforming to my advantage. I snuck up underneath this one here, using a 1-block gap to stab its foot repeatedly. It still shot me, so I switched to some banking shots with the Phoenix Blaster to finish the job. Another one soon fell into my trap and was defeated in short order. The third took a while to spawn in, but I eventually found one over here and trapped it with some classic falling sand. I then snuck under it to get my final kill. Back home, I combined some melee accessories, then hurried to the corruption to smash altars. In order to actually get frost armor, I would need to research the third tier of hard mode ore. So if you've played Terraria before, you know the drill. I mined some cobalt, I got a cobalt pickaxe, I mined some mithril, I got the mithril anvil, I got a mithril pickaxe, I mined some adamantite, I got an adamantite forge, and now we are ready. I got the adamantite pickaxe and most importantly, the full set of frost armor. Next on the list of needed upgrades was wings, so I took down some wyverns and got my frozen wings as I had collected an ice feather from one of the ice golem kills. I was starting to feel pretty powerful, but now I thought I wanted knockback immunity, so I got a cobalt shield from the dungeon. Continuing to move down the upgrade list, I entered the sparkly underground hallow and excavated a fishing spot, and then fished up 3 prismites, enough to research them and create a stack of life force potions. I did a bunch of grinding for tattered cloths, then got the goblin battle standard for the last piece of my hard mode puzzle, an actual weapon. I wanted the melee option, the Shadow Flame knife, and I actually got it right away. This thing is pretty awesome, and I used it to wipe out the remaining goblins. And that's it for the early hard mode upgrade bonanza. It's time for some quick arena expansion and some boss fights. First on the list, Skeletron Prime. And Skeletron Prime goes down. I immediately started against the twins, but unfortunately, I got too far away on my minecart when I killed the first twin, so the other one despawned. Now, if you watched my previous playthrough, and knowing that this playthrough is a fire-themed challenge, you already know what I'm going to craft immediately now that Skeletron Prime is down. Especially because I have infinite gel in Journey mode. That's right, it's flamethrower time. And I don't even have to change armor because the Frost armor provides benefits to both melee and ranged weapons. With my powerful new thing in hand, I immediately challenged the Destroyer, but I was unable to defeat it in time. Since it was daytime now and I had the flamethrower, I thought, why not try the Old One's army phase 2? I expected to win with the flamethrower, which is a great weapon for fighting straight lines of enemies along a flat area. I started off with the dagger for the easy waves, then switched to flamethrower when things got more dense. Unfortunately, once the ogre showed up in wave 7 and started absorbing all my damage, I got overwhelmed and the crystal was destroyed. However, I did defeat at least one ogre, fortuitously granting me a new and improved fire weapon, the Phantom Phoenix. This thing is great. It shoots 2 arrows at a time and occasionally fires an infinitely piercing phoenix projectile instead, which is both incredibly epic and a 100% counter for the long lines of enemies for future attempts at the Old One's army. A quick round of reforging on this thing made it even more powerful, and I stopped by the Tavern Keep to purchase an upgraded Fire Sentry as well, which would definitely help with supplementary DPS during my next event attempt. Before that though, night fell again, so it was time to challenge the twins for a rematch. And the twins go down to my Flaming Phoenix. With no time to waste, I summon the Destroyer immediately. And the Destroyer is down too. I still didn't have enough greater healing potions to research, so I fought the Destroyer again. Next, I upgraded my minecart to the mechanical cart and sped off into the night. For my next Between Bosses upgrade session, I first crafted wrath potions, once again from fish that I caught literally so long ago, but just forgot to use for these potions. Then, using these souls from the mechanical bosses, I created the Avengers emblem, combined that with the power glove to make the mechanical glove, and combined that with the magma stone to create the mighty fire gauntlet. I'm not actually sure if this is a good item, but I've always liked it, first because it's so fun to do these long crafting trees, and second because inflicting debuffs is just so much fun to me, so I absolutely love this item. Next, I pulled what might be considered a dirty journey mode trick. Basically, you only need one of a certain weapon, any weapon, to research it, and then duplicate infinite quantities. So what I did is, I used only 5 shark fins to craft a single mega shark, then duplicated 5 more mega sharks, and then used the shimmer to decraft them, providing me with 25 shark fins, which is enough to research them. So I only needed 5 shark fins to actually get all the way to the research quota. Mwahahaha! These shark fins allowed me to make hunter potions. Anyway, it was time to roast the Old One's army with the power of the mighty Phantom Phoenix. Enjoy those satisfying fast-forwarded phoenixes just flying through those enemies. And Old One's Army Tier 2 Take 2 is a success. Then, in order to be more prepared for Tier 3, I did the event again in order to get enough Defender medals to research. With that out of the way, I made even more houses, and then dove into the jungle in search of Plantera's bulb. Eventually I found it, but before making my arena, I decided to make a bunch of flat jungle space down here for the purposes of farming life fruit. It is much easier to do this on journey mode because you can just accelerate the passage of time to 24 times faster, allowing jungle grass to spread very quickly. So I started collecting some life fruits. Eventually I died and came back and found my last one near the surface while heading back. It was also next to this suspiciously high Plantera bulb, which I thought was interesting. Researching life fruits got me to 500 HP, or up to 600 with a life force potion. And using this shimmer, I got the Aegis fruit as well for some bonus defense points. And now it's really construction time. And there's my finished arena. And here's a warding charm of myths. And now it's time for the Plantera fight. And Plantera is cut down. Of course, I could look for more bulbs and grind Plantera 2 more times in order to duplicate her bags, but none of the weapons are fire-themed, so I, aka Zuko, can't use them. And I can already get the equipable item from the first bag, so there's no need for an extended Plantera grind, and I headed straight for the temple. I used my typical slow and steady, cautious approach to the temple, collecting all the loot along the way. I still love the flamethrower here, it just feels to me like such an easy point at the enemy and they die button. It also seems to have the perfect amount of knockback to stunlock even these tough lizards. In short order, I found myself in Golem's arena where I killed all the enemies, disarmed all the traps, and placed platforms, torches, and stat buffing furniture such as lizard banners, campfires, and heart lanterns. With the arena set up, I began my first match against Golem. and Golem goes down. Now, I definitely need to grind Golem for treasure bags, but my easy victory the first time made me a bit careless, and I did die on my second attempt. I switched to Chlorophyte Armor for some improved stats and returned to Golem's chamber where I got rid of the middle platform layer. I realized during my loss that this platform was actually making it harder to dodge Golem, because the boss was standing on it, giving me less room to fly overhead. I defeated the boss 2 more times, granting me infinite bags. What I wanted from the bags was the Sunstone. Returning home, I immediately summoned a solar eclipse where I could farm the enemies for 2 more pieces of the coveted celestial shell. And without too much difficulty, I soon acquired the Neptune's shell. Night fell before I was able to get the Moonstone, so I headed to the Hardmode dungeon to maybe get the Inferno Fork or perhaps some useful equips. Unfortunately, I was killed before getting anything good, but that's not really too big of a deal. Anyway, during my second solar eclipse, I collected a Moonstone and immediately combined my stones into the Celestial Stone. I returned to the dungeon where I ended up getting a Paladin's Shield and, more importantly, a researchable quantity of ectoplasm, which was needed to craft the Naughty Presents in order to summon the Frost Moon. That's right, in the fire-themed Zuko challenge, the Frost Moon is actually a vitally important event, since the Santa robots have a chance to drop the Elf Melter, an upgraded version of the Flamethrower. Before that event though, I noticed that werewolves were spawning, so I had the chance to get the final piece of the Celestial Shell. I set the spawns to maximum and dug this little cave tunnel thing to farm enemies safely, and I ended up with the Mooncharm very soon. I used the Tinker's Workshop to combine everything into the Celestial Shell itself. Next, from the Tavern Keep, I purchased the highest quality Fire Sentry, as well as the Red Riding Armor to try out a sentry build against the Frost Moon. With my sentries placed, I started the event. Now, I wouldn't really say this event went well. The basic enemies were easy enough for my sentries to take down, but the Phantom Phoenix with cursed fire arrows is quite obsolete at this point and was not taking down the mini-bosses swiftly at all. On the other hand, it was really fun to chip away at all the monsters while trying to stay alive, so I definitely succeeded from the if you had fun you won perspective. When the Santa robot guys started coming in, I focused on them above all else, as nothing really mattered to me for this event besides getting the Elf Melter. So yeah, basically I kept blasting and dodging all night, but it was kind of all over when the Ice Queen came in. I was completely unable to take down the queens with any sort of speed, which made it difficult to focus on the Santas. Here's a fun clip of me desperately dodging Ice Queen attacks while focusing down another Santa robot because that's really what I wanted. And if you look closely, this was actually a super hype moment because this specific Santa dropped the Elf Melter. This exact moment may have been my favorite of the challenge. Typically I play Terraria in a very cautious way by sort of over-preparing for every fight. This is the first time I've done a challenge that restricts my weaponry, and I was really nervous about being able to win fights without access to all of my usual builds and weapons. But here, dodging for my life, and barely taking down a Santa with outdated weapons, as the Ice Queen tries to kill me with Icy Blast from above, and just barely unlocking my next upgrade weapon felt so good. So in the end, I got exactly what I wanted, and surely, with an unreal Elf Melter, probably the most powerful fire weapon in the entire game, with something like double the power of the original Flamethrower that was already a great choice for crowd control, even an amateur like myself would be able to take on the Old One's army tier 3, right? Well, not quite. Despite my increased power, the enemies overwhelmed me and I died, with the crystal falling shortly thereafter. Now, why do I need to fight this event anyway? Well, let's just say that, for someone like me, the Elf Melter is not going to be enough to defeat the Moon Lord. So, because Zuko in the TV show is not only a firebender, but also befriends dragons, we are going to allow dragon-themed stuff for this endgame phase, which means we need some Betsy weapons. I also want to use the Betsy wings, my favorite endgame wings, alongside the soaring insignia for movement during the Moon Lord fight. But what else could I do to power up enough to beat the event? Well, there's an easy answer. Go for the other absolutely broken dragon-themed item in the endgame, the Stardust Dragon Staff. So I switched my target to the cultist. In my first attempt, I accidentally hit the wrong cultist, and died soon thereafter with the boss at literally 500 health remaining. Between attempts, I made a quick surface hallow to farm for prismatic lacewings for later, getting enough to research for unlimited Empress attempts. Then I elf meltered some more cultists for a rematch against this boss. Alright, with that guy down, I headed straight for the Stardust Pillar. I laid down some sentries to get things under control, and used my really quite inadequate elf melter to kill a few enemies at a time between deaths. I eventually got the hang of it though, and actually survived all the way from the 70 enemies left point of the pillar's shield, down to the full destruction of the pillar. Not bad for my standards. With those fragments in hand, I of course immediately got the Stardust Dragon Staff, a superbly powerful weapon that is just the bump we need to conquer Old One's Army Tier 3 and get to that endgame Betsy gear. I did a quick detour for variegated lardfish in the jungle to get summoning potions research in order to increase the power of my dragon companion. Luckily, you can still fight the Old One's army while other lunar pillars are active, so the fight was on. As expected, the powerful dragon was chewing through the weak enemies of the first round, and I didn't even have to move from my position for Wave 1. For Wave 2, I helped the dragon out with a relentless barrage of Phoenix Blasts. This thing may be outdated, but the Phoenix is still perfect for firing in straight lines. For Wave 3, I focused on those very difficult and persistent flying enemies, but eventually had to leave my spot and get some Elf Melter action in on the melee monsters too, since they were getting too strong for the Phoenix. Given how Wave 3 went, I decided to get up close and personal in Wave 4, and just started torching foes with the Elf Melter from the start. The Phoenix was still helpful for the Dark Mages, since they summon a bunch of weak minions, so the infinitely piercing but relatively weak Phoenix is the perfect choice. For Wave 5, I brought out my bow again to focus down the Ogres, as I thought getting too close with the Elf Melter would leave me too vulnerable to the Ogre's attacks. But then I tried the Elf Melter for the second one and realized that's probably just better. Although, to be honest, the Stardust Dragon minion was really my DPS. Just look at how fast this Ogre went down with the combined Elf Melter and Dragon. Wave 6 was a real challenge, and I was just frantically running back and forth trying to push those monsters back. And then in Wave 7, Betsy shows up for the final battle. It is really a race against time, as I have to defeat her before the crystal is killed by all the other enemies. And Betsy goes down. Now, I just have to do it 2 more times to get enough bags to research them. But first, I had a classic journey mode dilemma here. Should I open this bag to get a more powerful weapon to help make future attempts more reliably beatable? But then I'd have to beat it an extra time because I would need 3 more bags instead of just 2 more bags. Well, in the end, I decided to just open the first bag and get a weapon, because I wanted to secure my victory. And I ended up getting the very powerful Flying Dragon. Reforging this thing to Legendary gives me an absurdly powerful weapon. All that's needed is a quick switch to Valhalla Knight Armor, and I was ready. And I mean, yeah, like on Wave 1, you can barely even see the enemies due to the absurd base damage of this weapon, eliminating them in a few blasts. The later waves were no trouble either, just see how quickly and effortlessly this Ogre goes down. Soon enough, Betsy was here for a rematch, but it was not going to go her way. Although I found that the projectiles from the Flying Dragon were not quite fast enough to keep up with the, well, Flying Dragon herself. I thought it was taking too long, so I checked down on the surface, and sure enough, my crystal was on the brink of death. I switched to the Elf Melter to try to kill Betsy faster, as I was able to hit her much more reliably with the fast-moving stream of blue fire. And if you thought that the whole killing the last Santa tank as the Ice Queen is blasting me with snow from above was a photo finish, just check this out. As my crystal died, with Betsy still at 6,000 HP, me and my Stardust Dragon somehow managed to get in enough burst damage that I actually succeeded in killing her before the despawn animation finished, getting myself a treasure bag. For the next battle, I decided to try something new. In all of my years of playing Terraria, I've never actually used asphalt before. So I laid down a big road all along my arena here to be able to switch between portals more easily. I started the event again and soon was zipping around slaying enemies left and right. For my next Betsy fight, I decided to try a new strategy called Doing Better, and was able to defeat her more easily with the Flying Dragon this time. The same goes for the fourth and final fight as well. I started opening bags and I actually got the wings on the first try. I also got all the other weapons researched as well. Now that I'm decked out with Betsy gear, I just needed one final upgrade, the Soaring Insignia. Since the Empress is the flying boss and is easy enough to hit with ranged weapons, I decided to use the Aerial Bane Bow and Venom Arrows, which were chosen because they have the highest base damage of any arrow. I also really enjoyed the asphalt and thought it would really help me evade some of the Empress's attacks, so I laid down a strip of asphalt in my surface halo. With this new arena complete, I released and torched a prismatic lacewing, starting my fight against the Empress. And the Empress goes down, granting me the Soaring Insignia. Now it's time for a Pillar Destruction montage. And now the Moon Lord is all that remains for my Zuko challenge. Here we go. Well, that's it. Absolutely not the cleanest Moonlord fight of all time, but the Zuko Fire/Dragon challenge is complete. To summarize this challenge, it was extremely fun overall. I feel that the visuals and just the concept of setting everything on fire in all sorts of different colors, red for Hellfire, purple for Shadowflame, green for Cursed Fire, and blue for Frostburn, is simply an incredibly fun thing to do at all points in the game. Using the Molotov cocktails for the first time, and using some more niche picks like the Elf Melter late game, was definitely interesting and fun as well. Alright, so that's my summary. I really hope you enjoyed the video and all of my music. Thank you so much for watching, and please tune in next time.